Good morning again, and thank you for attending the Dignity Fund Coalition's Mayoral Town Hall. We are just about to get started. I just want to remind everybody, please be aware of your exits. Please be exceptionally conscious of the fact that you have a very wide array of people in the room with you today, some of whom may have different accessibility requirements than you do, so please be cautious as you move around the room, that you don't step on toes or bump into folks. The restrooms are located in the hallways on either side of the first floor and also in the hallways upstairs in the balcony. And we are going to, I'm going to introduce the show in just a second, and then when the candidates come on, they're going to be making some opening statements. And then when the opening statements finish, we're going to go into the live Q&A. The way the live Q&A is going to work is that we are currently taking questions from the floor on cards. You were all given a card when you came in. If you don't have a card or a pen, there are Q&A ushers who have their hands up right now in all your sections. I see in the balcony, they're behind most of you, but there are folks up there who have cards and pens. If you need assistance, they can actually help you in filling out the card. Put your question on the card. The cards will be brought down to the front. We are sorting through them to make sure that we don't duplicate questions. In some instances, we may actually combine a couple of the questions together if they're the same topic. And then we are transmitting the questions by magic from over here to a tablet that the moderator will have with her on stage. And that's how your questions will get asked. The opening statements are about 3 minutes in length with a little question opportunity from the moderator. The individual questions are 90 seconds in length, so we hope to be able to get through a fair amount of your questions. If your question does not get asked, please don't be upset about that. We're going to compile all the questions and give them to the candidates after the event is over, so that if they wish to, they can address them through their own materials, their website, whatever it might be. So your questions will get read, I hope, at some point by the candidates, and they will get read by us this morning, certainly. Any questions from anybody? That's a really stupid thing for me to say. I'm not going to stand up here and answer questions. Okay, so the Q&A ushers will be in the hall throughout the entire event. So if at any point in time you have a card that you want them to take or you need something, just raise your hand and the Q&A ushers will come address whatever need it is. Please don't yell out loud. We have someone down front who has their hand up already. So please, once the event has started, please be respectful of the fact that there are people who are trying to communicate with you, and so let them be heard. Please don't talk over anybody. There are simultaneous translations occurring in Spanish and Chinese in the room, so you might hear people talking quietly. That's because they are talking to folks who are using listening devices at various places in the room. And with that, I'm going to introduce Marie Jobling and Fiona Hines, who are the co-chairs of the Dignity Fund Coalition and your sponsors for today's event.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So yes, I'm Marie Jobling, one of the co-chairs of the Dignity Fund Coalition, and I'm along with today Fiona Hensey, who's the other co-chair. We want to welcome you to this historic event. Woo! Yeah. Woo! and as I look out, I see most of the 1,000 people who RSVP'd for this event continuing to fill the hall at the Herbst Theater. It's so awesome. But it's not all. So we also welcome those who are watching at home or from their office via the live stream on the Dignity Fund website. Another way that technology helps keep us engaged and connected. So yes, the event is brought to you today by the Dignity Fund Coalition. We're more than 40 nonprofit and community organizations who come together to increase the awareness of the challenges and opportunities that exist with the growing number of seniors and people with disabilities in San Francisco. We helped create and pass the Dignity Fund legislation on the November 2016 ballot. This fund added $6 million in this fiscal year in a baseline of funding for services and supports, and that amount will increase steadily over the next 19 years. But we really know that this is just a down payment on what is needed for the future. So you can learn more about the fund, the coalition, the kinds of services that is funding. If you look in the newspaper insert that was on your chair as you came in, and there's more in the lobby, and that was provided by our friends at San Francisco Bay Times, so we thank them. Now, Fiona, who else do we thank?
We'd also like to thank the SCAN Foundation for partially funding the event. As you have seen, we've tried to make the event as accessible as possible, so we'd like to thank our interpreters, both our language interpreters and our ASL interpreters and our captioner. I would like to thank the members of the Dignity Fund Coalition for all their hard work in recruiting folks to get here. And most of all, I would like to thank our volunteers who have done such a great job putting this event together. I'd also like to thank the Department of Elections who gave a great pitch for ranked choice voting and voter registration. And just everyone who worked on the steering committee for this event, who put it all together. So why don't we give everyone a hand for our volunteers?
So Mark kind of filled you in on the question and answer portion of this town hall meeting, which is really most of the event. Again, you should have questions in the material that was given to you when you came in. We have ushers who are standing ready to hand out more and to collect. They have their hands up and they're waving these cards. They're in the balcony as well as down here on the floor. And as Mark mentioned, we will try to get as many of the questions answered today. That's why we did some advance work so that you have several pages of questions and answers from the key candidates and leaders today. But every question will be part of the future for the Dignity Fund Coalition. It tells us what's really important to you, whether it gets asked or answered here today. So I think that's kind of it, Fiona.
Okay, so now we get to begin. So now for the main event, I would like to introduce the candidates for mayor: Angela Alioto, London Breed, Jane Kim, and Mark Leno. And And now I have the pleasure of introducing our moderator. Yomi Rong is an East Bay advocate who is passionate about long-term care services and supports working in healthcare to ensure that people with disabilities have access to doctors and good healthcare services. She works as an ADA compliance manager. She also was the former executive director of Center for Independent Living Incorporated, which is a Berkeley-based organization where she advanced the argument for long-term care services and supports. She also was a journalist and wrote for many daily papers, including the San Jose Mercury News. Given her vast knowledge of disability issues, we are thrilled that she is moderating the town hall today. I'd like to introduce Yomi Rong.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? All right, this is a nice crowd. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Town Hall for the Senior and Disability community. And a warm welcome to everyone joining us via live stream. I am delighted to be your moderator today and thank the Dignity Fund Coalition for inviting me to participate. I live across the bay in Oakland, so I will not have an opportunity to vote in June for any of the candidates on the stage. But as someone who visits and loves San Francisco, I am watching this election with interest. Your next mayor will have a great deal of power and influence to make this wonderful city function even better for everyone who lives, works, and plays here. I appreciate the candidates giving us a chance to ask a few questions, get a sense of their priorities, and hear their plans for how they will lead San Francisco if elected. The candidates on the stage were selected, invited to participate based on specific criteria. The Dignity Fund Coalition invited candidates that were consistently polling at 6% or above, However, there are other candidates in the audience today who are here and who will be available, I assume, after our discussion to meet with you and answer your questions. Thank you. Would the other candidate like to wave or?
My name is Alioto. I'm one of the 8 mayor candidates. I'm a social worker. I work for the government, and this is government corruption and election corruption, not to invite all 8 candidates.
Thank you. All right. So candidates, we have about 90 minutes together, probably a little bit less. So it's important that we end on time. After opening statements, I'll ask just a handful of questions, and then I'll turn it over to the audience. Someone from the Dignity Fund will collect the questions in the room and the live stream and submit those to me. You will each have 90 seconds to respond. Please be succinct. Speak clearly so that interpreters can follow the conversation. And please try to pay attention to our timekeepers who are over there to the left. If you go over time significantly, I will have to interrupt and ask that you complete your sentence. So.
Yeah, it is.
Is that too far? Can we have the timekeepers repositioned so that we can all see those signs? Is that too far? Would you like folks to be in the center? Can you please move?
See, the issue is we're speaking that way. We're not going to see her putting
Absolutely.
the
No,
sign.
I understand. I'll also be paying attention, but yes, that's a good idea. We'll have you reposition. Okay.
Hi.
And Nomi, how long is the opening?
You will have 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes for your opening statement. So please make an opening statement in response to the following question. A broad system of well-coordinated policies, programs, and services support the ability for all San Franciscans to live and thrive in this great city. These programs and services include accessibility, nutrition, food security, eviction defense, affordability, transportation, and skilled healthcare and home care. As mayor, what specific policies will you implement to promote the development and advancement of this critical system of supported services? You have 3 minutes, and Angela, we'll start with you.
Okay. First of all, thank you all so very, very much for coming out this morning. It's wonderful to see so many people involved in our democracy. I just got back from, today is Grandparents' Day. I had one grandchild earlier this morning, and when I leave here, I go to the next grandchild. So happy Grandparents' Day to all the grandparents out there. When I was supervisor and president of the Board of Supervisors, I was the legislator for the majority of the disability legislation and resolutions that we did at the time. I have been involved in the ADA since it was initiated, working with Vice President Al Gore and, of course, my niece Michaela. Have been extremely involved in the ADA and all of the issues that go with disability. I, for the last 18 years, have been a civil rights lawyer. I have had many clients who have disabilities, who have really changed the world through the lawsuits that we have filed and the verdicts that we have gotten from juries on how you don't treat people differently. You don't fire people because they have a disability. If they can do the requisites of the job, you keep them. As to the safety issues here in San Francisco, there are so many transportation issues where I believe those with disabilities and the elderly are being totally ignored in the conversations of whether we should do something or not. Let's take the BRTs on Geary Street for an example. If they do that fast lane on Geary Street, they're going to take away some of the bus stops. Has anybody talked to the elderly community? Has anybody talked to the disability community? Or for that matter, to the families, to the people who have children who need bus stops? Is there a remedy where we can have a compromise, where there's some fast and there's some that stop at the required bus stops? That's just one of the many issues out there that affect the elderly, the disabled, and the families, which which often have very much of the same issues. I have literally worked my whole life in the health arena, and with homelessness being one of my priorities when I worked with Mayor Gavin Newsom to permanently, supportively house the chronically homeless. Those are the homeless that have been on the street for 4 to 6 years, who literally the most difficult people to take off the street because the street has become their home. We were very, very successful. The government basically stopped doing our program in 2012 and moved the housing and moved the money from where it was for the formerly homeless to the new people coming into town with all the new businesses, and as such, there was no place to put the formerly homeless, and we've ended up with the homeless situation that we presently have. Dirty streets is one of the biggest issues in this campaign, and that is another issue. I was the author of the needle exchange legislation, and it was to
Angela, please
exchange.
wrap it up.
We're not doing that today, but thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. London.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's London Breed, and I'm really honored to be running for mayor of the city that I was born and raised in. In fact, my grandmother raised me here, right up the street in public housing, and I just think about the frustrations that I experienced in caring for her when there was a time where, sadly, she developed dementia and she couldn't care for herself. We were displaced from Plaza East, and there were over 300 units there, and there was development, and they were all torn down, and only 200 units were rebuilt. We had to move, and we moved down the street, fortunately, but we were in a townhome, and I recall the frustration of, no elevators, only stairs, and just really trying to help my grandmother up and down the stairs, and my frustration with needing services, needing support, and needing a unit that's accessible for her. We lived there for a few years. I've worked with many of the services in the city over the years, including in-home support services workers who still, I'm in contact with many of them who still work for the program today. I think about just the challenges and just imagine if my grandmother didn't have my support to help her through the process, to fill out the many numerous applications for Medi-Cal and all of the things that you have to do in order to just get services. It is really a frustrating process, but when I think about what's happening, here in San Francisco with so many seniors who live alone, so many seniors who actually don't qualify for services, and what we need to do better as a city to make sure that they're getting the support that they need. When I served on the San Francisco Redevelopment Agency Commission, and for example, townhomes were brought to our attention for development, I constantly pushed back and opposed the development of townhomes because they're not accessible. In many cases, when we're providing affordable housing, we're providing it to seniors, and we have to make sure that they can age in place in dignity. This is why I supported the Dignity Fund, because I wanted to make sure that those individuals who basically, again, may not qualify for services but are still low income, spending the majority of their money on medication and food and other services, had at least some additional support, had opportunities to qualify and be a part of the Meals on Wheels program and other things that we provide as a city. We owe it to our seniors who took care of us to take care of them and to make sure that we're doing a better job as a city of not just allocating resources, but making sure that we're out there identifying, our senior population, that we're doing a better job of communicating with our senior population, and we're providing them and connecting them with a social worker or in-home support services or whatever it is that they need in order to live in their homes in dignity. We definitely have a lot of work to do. When there was a heat wave in the city and county of San Francisco, yes, we sent out text messages and did other things, but what we didn't do is make sure we connected with aging and adult services to contact those seniors to provide them the support that they needed so that they weren't left alone in their homes. We got work to do, and I'm the mayor to do it.
Thank you, London. Jane, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Jane Kim, and I've had the honor of representing and serve our city a little over the last decade. I'm starting out as a Board of Education member and now serving on the Board of Supervisors, where I represent a district with a growing senior and aging population. I was proud to fight to make San Francisco the only city in the country to make community college free for all of our residents, regardless of age, income, or any type of GPA prerequisite. And it was very important that we made sure that this was free to all of our residents, because free community college programs around the city are typically limited to recent high school graduates. We wanted to make sure that residents of any age could attend City College for free to continue learning in our only lifelong learning institution. Second, I've been proud to work with many of you. Thank you. I've been proud to work with many of you to have negotiated and won the most affordable and middle-income housing on this board over the last 7 years. And I've been proud to ensure that we also fight for affordable senior housing, whether it's funding the new senior housing on St. Anthony's, to also supporting to rehabilitate many of our single-room occupancy hotels, which have become affordable housing for our senior community. I was proud to co-sponsor the legislation to mandate grab bars in the showers for our senior population, and also to fight for a revolving loan fund so that SRO operators can rehabilitate the failing elevators throughout the Tenderloin and South of Market neighborhood. I was also proud to work with you on Eviction Protection 2.0 in 2015, after which we have seen a dramatic reduction in low-fault evictions, which have been disproportionately targeting seniors, immigrants who speak English as a second language, and individuals with disabilities. Evictions don't happen evenly throughout San Francisco. Landlords do target our most vulnerable residents, and we have increasingly seen that seniors and individuals with disabilities are overwhelmingly the targets for evictions, and we must do everything that we can to protect residents that need our support, which is why I'm proud to support Proposition F, right to counsel, to ensure that all of our tenants have an attorney during this very important proceeding where they may lose their home, and more than their home, the community and network they're a part of, the neighbors that check on them every day and make sure that they got up that day or can help them get to the doctor's appointment that's down the street. Third, I was proud to support low-income free muni for seniors and individuals with disabilities, and have been a champion for Vision Zero efforts in our district. We know that you are more likely to be hit by a car if you're a senior or a youth or low income, and we are doing everything that we can to make our streets safer for pedestrians via daylighting, signalized mid-block crosswalks so our seniors can cross, and increase safeties throughout our neighborhoods. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark.
Good morning, everyone. I am Mark Leno, and as a senior citizen, I am especially pleased to be joining you today and thanking the Dignity
That makes
Fund.
two of us. That makes two of us.
The Dignity Fund and the 30 organizations that make up this coalition. And so proud that Prop I has passed and committed to making sure it is fully implemented every step of the way, because our goal, of course, is for everyone to be able to age in place with comfort and dignity and the support services they need. And that would include veterans and those with HIV as a chronic disease and all those who are fighting chronic illnesses. And as mayor of San Francisco will be a senior welcoming, senior serving, and senior safe city that will lead the way for the rest of the country. And I don't just throw empty words at you. I bring a body of work that shows my commitment to the senior and communities for those with disabilities. We fought the banks to make sure that widows and widowers were not kicked out of their homes by foreclosures that were unnecessary. And we protected residents of long-term care facilities for the elderly from abuse and from eviction. And also, not once but twice, authored the single-payer universal health care reform bill in Sacramento. Also, authoring the Fair Education Act, the Fair, Accurate, Inclusive, and Respectful Education Act, which now requires that the role and contribution of those with disabilities will be included in our social studies classes for students 4th grade and up in public schools in California, so we can learn from our history and bring the respect necessary to it. But the challenges are very great in terms of housing affordability. That's why I amended the Ellis Act to exempt single-room occupancies, protecting 12,000 of San Francisco's most vulnerable, those who are oftentimes seniors, low income, fixed income, and those with disabilities, protecting them from wholesale eviction through the Ellis Act. That is now history. Those 12,000 folks are safe from eviction. So the $38 million baseline and the $50 million for the coming year will be funding not only services and necessary changes in San Francisco, but following the needs assessment that was step 1 of Prop I. So I want to thank you all again for being here today and participating in this mayoral election.
Thank you. You were each given a set of pre-questions related to long-term services and supports, and we appreciate you all answering those questions. I think those answers have been or will be distributed to the audience and posted online in some format later today. So I just want to circle back to a couple of those themes. A great number of people in this room and joining us on the live stream benefit from the Dignity Fund, which, as you know, is a permanent voter-approved set-aside to address the growing needs and for services and supports for adults with disabilities, for veterans, and those those living with chronic illnesses, excuse me. If there is a measure on the November ballot to weaken the Dignity Fund and similar voter-supported funding measures, will you oppose it? Mark.
The good news is I spoke with Supervisor Peskin just yesterday, and I was assured that anything that goes to the ballot this November will have nothing to do with the Dignity Fund, will have nothing to do with any of the other voter-approved funds that we currently have. There will be a revisiting of the funding for the arts through the hotel tax. So I am assured that there is no risk, but if there ever were, you have my 100% commitment that I would stand with you in support of the $50 million plus the annual $3 million increase, because the needs are so much beyond what the Dignity Fund can fund. We have to build upon it, not subtract from it.
Thank you. Jane.
As the author of another fund, which includes both the children's funds and the public education enrichment fund for our younger residents, I completely understand the importance of ensuring that our stakeholders have consistent funding streams that are guaranteed every single year to serve some of our most important institutions, whether they're our youth-serving organizations and schools, all the way to our senior-serving organizations and meal programs. I fully support the Dignity Fund and ensuring a dedicated funding stream for these issues. I get it. It is a very difficult thing to tie the hands of legislators when making budgetary decisions around our $10 billion budget and investing it back wisely in our city. But I think we've seen over and over again that certain stakeholders lose in this process when there is not a guaranteed and dedicated funding stream. And for that reason, I will continue to strongly support the Dignity Fund.
So, one moment, please. So if there is a measure on the ballot that threatens the sanctity of this fund, will you oppose it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. London.
Thank you. Not only did I vote to put Proposition I, the Dignity Fund measure, on the ballot, I actually campaigned for it throughout the city, along with the driver of the ballot measure, Supervisor Malia Cohen. I truly believe the excitement of why I supported this particular set aside, which traditionally I'm not a big fan of, is because it would provide real opportunities for many of those seniors who don't qualify for services. It was an extension to make sure that our entire senior population, who clearly had challenges with income, but like I said, could not necessarily qualify for services, to make sure that they had the support that they need to live in dignity. That's what this is all about, and I will continue to fight to make sure that we support this very important set aside for the purposes of ensuring that the senior population in San Francisco has the support and resources they need, making sure that the connection between opportunities and services and the people that we say we care about supporting is really important to me and will continue to be important to me as mayor.
So you would oppose if there was a ballot measure
Yes.
to weaken the fund? Thank you. Angela?
I would oppose any altercation to the Dignity Fund. I supported I, and I also campaigned at the time for I. You know, when I was president of the Board of Supervisors, I bifurcated the general fund in order to create the Children's Youth Fund, and I didn't win that at the board. There are certain areas of people in San Francisco that people don't believe should have special attention, and the elderly and the youth are definitely those areas. The amount of discrimination that occurs to the elderly, the youth, and the disabled is stunning to me. And that's something that after I left City Hall, I learned as a civil rights lawyer representing many elderly and many disabled. So at the time when I was president of the board, I went to the ballot to bifurcate the Children's Fund, and it won with 78% at the ballot. So it goes to show that like the Children's Fund and like the Dignity Prop I, the people of the city understand how the elderly are treated and how the youth are treated, and they vote overwhelmingly in favor. What we need to do now is make our elected officials understand that.
Thank you. The next question is about affordability of services. As you know, Medicare does not cover most long-term care, and eligibility for Medi-Cal is very limited. As mayor, what would you do to make critical home and community-based services more affordable to people who do not qualify for Medi-Cal services or who are required to spend down their assets to achieve eligibility? London, I will start with you.
This is a great question because, again, I experienced this with my grandmother when she developed dementia, and the frustration of not only trying to take care of her for many years, but more importantly, needing help, not just in-home support services workers, but needing a lot more than what I was getting. And so, you know, getting her into Laguna Honda after a few years was absolutely incredible. It really, you know, changed my life because when you're taking care of an elderly, I consider my grandmother my parent because she was my only parent, but when you're taking care of an elderly parent and you get the support that you need, there is nothing like the relief and the security that it brings to make sure that they are in a place where they are taken care of. And again, I will say that there are too many seniors who are living on our streets who are homeless because they don't have family and they don't have access to long-term care when they need it. And there are too many people who are low-income seniors and again may have challenges with being able to qualify for services but can't get access
So
to
what
places.
would you do for
And
that group of seniors?
Yes, so part of what I would do is work with a task force in order to develop something long-term for the purposes of making the appropriate changes, the administrative changes, and making sure that we use resources like the Dignity Fund to help subsidize what could help assist in allowing individuals who need long-term care access to it.
Thank you. Mark, same question. So the question, yes, is about what specific things could you do or ideas that you might have to support those who cannot qualify for Medi-Cal services but desperately need them?
Sure. One of the things we learned from the campaign on Prop I is that 50% of San Francisco's seniors and upwards of 70% of those with disabilities are living with less than $35,000 a year. Now, that may not be low enough to qualify for Medi-Cal, and so this is the upper poor that we're talking about. The Institute on Aging, along with the Department of Adult and Aging Services, has had a pilot program over the recent years called Support at Home. It's a public-private partnership, and it serves exactly this population. I would suggest that we make sure, through public or private funding, we make that pilot project permanent so that this population is no longer overlooked. And while we're on the subject of the Department of Adult and Aging Services, I think it's time we consider a name that will reflect that it also serves the disability community, because without that in the name, too many folks don't know that there are services available to them that they are not accessing. So it is community outreach by just the simple change of reflecting all those who are served in the name.
Thank you. Jane?
In 2014, when I led the negotiation for the Fight for 15 and increasing the minimum wage increasing the wages of our minimum wage workers to $15 an hour, I fought to ensure that IHSS workers and home support services workers were not left out of this deal as they had been in 2003. IHS workers are making poverty wages to do incredibly important work to take care of our seniors, individuals with disabilities, and other individuals in needs. Many jobs are going to be disappearing in our country over the next 15 years with robots and automation and algorithms.
Jane, if I can just, I'm going to have a question about home care workers, but I wanted you to address affordability of services for folks that cannot qualify for Medi-Cal. What would you do to be able to bridge that gap?
I was getting to that.
Okay, just making sure we're not veering off.
I believe that IHSS workers is part of that, actually. So getting to adequately funding IHSS workers so that people can stay in place in their home, in their community, with their neighbors, with access to the services that they've already gotten accustomed to, I think is an important way that we can ensure that seniors can age in place with dignity, and they can do that with IHSS workers. But we need to actually dedicate real revenue to funding these services. So I would like to increase funding to pay IHS workers and make them living wage jobs. And as I'd mentioned, we are going to see jobs go away, but jobs that include care of children, our seniors, and home care, these jobs are not going to get automated away. So we should make them real living wage, middle class jobs so we can support our senior community here in our city.
Thank you. Angela, so how would you fill that gap for seniors who don't qualify for some of the means-based programs in Medi-Cal, but yet need the services?
Well, first of all, I've been working in healthcare for my whole life, literally, and it's really interesting how when you work one-on-one with people, you realize that the regulations need to be changed. The regulations need to be changed. They are so obstructive for the person who is sick and for the elderly person who needs the care. The regulations make it so difficult. For example, last year, my brother Thomas was very, very sick. And in fact, he passed away. And I was trying to get home care help for Thomas, and it was incredibly difficult because the home care people had so many rules and regulations that they were literally shutting them all down in Alameda last year. And it was totally ridiculous because these were wonderful health care places. And with these rules and regulations, of course there should be oversight, always oversight, of course. But having said that, when you have wonderful home care workers, who by the way are never paid enough, and you have wonderful home care places, they shouldn't be burdened down by so many rules and regulations that make it impossible. And then what happens when you're in the hospital? I recently had a friend that I had moved from St. Luke's Hospital to Laguna Honda. They used up all of her money and then said, okay, time for you to leave. And it was really pretty outrageous. So you have to, number one, I think healthcare people need to have an advocate. I think that's extremely important. Just like tenants being kicked out, healthcare people need to have an advocate and need to know the funding that they can get. But it's the rules and regulations that need to be fixed.
Thank you. So a couple of you have already touched on home care workers, and so we appreciate that you've done that, Jane and Angela. Home care workers are really the unsung heroes in our society, really propping up communities, providing necessary supports and services so that people can remain safely and independently in their homes and live in community versus institutions. As we know, seniors and adults with disabilities make up 25% of San Franciscans, and that number is expected to increase. What would you do as mayor to address the workforce crisis that we're currently seeing, the shortage of health and long-term care workers? What would you do as mayor to address this workforce crisis? And I'll start with Mark. Mark.
Through the 10-year experience of sharing my mother's Alzheimer's before she died 5 years ago, I got to know firsthand the extraordinary value and the extraordinary uncommon kind of person who does home care work. My mother had a caregiver who gave so much of herself, and this was all in the state of Florida, where there were very few legal protections for that worker's wages or for benefits and work conditions. Here in California, we do somewhat better, and I was pleased in Sacramento to co-author a bill that prohibited 24-hour shifts, that it's now 8-hour shifts, and that, of course, is not only good for the worker, but also good for the receiver of the care, because no one can do a job reasonably without any kind of breaks, and of course on a poverty salary. So we need to focus on career ladders for home care workers. Homebridge has a career ladder program, which I think we can learn from and build upon so that there is advancement in the work and that there can be a career path. Also, there's consideration, I understand, at the community needs assessment process that is looking at tiered wages as well. Some incentives, not only for wages, but also for the working conditions of our home care workers. They are doing the Lord's work. We need to be there to support them. Free muni for these workers is a possibility. Other benefits that we can offer.
Thank you. London, same question. About the home care worker shortage.
Me?
Yes. Oh. I'm sorry, I didn't know if you
I'm sorry. Can you say the last part of the question, because I can hardly hear?
Absolutely. Are you having trouble hearing me?
A little bit.
A little bit? Okay. Sorry about that. We are facing a workforce crisis in health and long-term service providers. What would you do as mayor to address that crisis?
Thank you. And, my experience with working with in-home support services workers is, of course, again, with my grandmother. And fortunately, I had an amazing person who worked really hard to take care of her. She knew me growing up, and, she treated my grandmother like she was her family. And it is backbreaking work, just to give her a bath and the number of things that we had to do. I mean, I've had challenges doing it when I used to also help take care of my grandmother. And I think about, at that time, less than $10 an hour, what Gloria was actually making to help support my grandmother. It was heartbreaking. She was extremely low income, and she definitely deserved more. And I truly believe that, our healthcare workers deserve to be paid a lot more than they are getting paid. And one of the things that is being discussed now at the Board of Supervisors is the minimum compensation ordinance, which increases on top of the increase for the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It increases the hourly wage of in-home support services workers to $1.86. But there's just so much more that we have to do to make sure that we support this population. And I think that we need to come up with a long-term plan to gradually increase those wages so that they are, decent middle-income wages. And I will focus on doing that as mayor. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Angela, same question, and then Jane. Angela.
Again, I have been working with people with disabilities and in-home care for years of my life, whether they're formerly homeless people or whether they're just in the system and having health care needs. I was endorsed by the New United Healthcare Workers because of all of our work when I was president of the Board of Supervisors and after. I have not stopped working for healthcare workers because I think they're the most underpaid. But I'll tell you what I think the worst situation is for them in San Francisco. They don't have a place to live. There's no affordable housing for healthcare workers. We need to specifically get housing for healthcare workers so that they're not traveling for an hour to get where they have to go, which is extremely expensive. They're not in this unbelievable traffic that has been created in San Francisco, and they're not with the person they're supposed to be taking care of. It's too many hassles. And so there's a new program in San Jose that I absolutely love, where they did a housing unit of over 400 units. Well, it might be about 380 because they used other units for retail on the bottom, that is specifically for the nurses that work at the hospital 3 blocks away, and the rent is dependent upon their salary. So some nurses that make more money pay more rent, and those that made less money paid less rent. So people that make $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, which is not considered affordable in San Francisco, are given a rent that is based on their salary so they can be near the hospital.
Thank you.
We need to do more programs like that.
Thank you. Jane. Thank you.
I'm the co-author of the minimum compensation ordinance, which would give a raise to our IHS workers, and also the author of Proposition C, which will generate $19 million to help fund this pay increase for our IHS workers. I really believe that we just simply need to pay our home care workers more, whether you are a child care worker to an in-home support services worker, you are making poverty wages to do some of the most important work. And I think as we look to the future of work and the future of industries, this is the industry that is going to be growing. So we need to invest public dollars to make these real living wage jobs so that people can afford to do this full time and actually serve a very important need in all of our communities, whether it is serving our youngest residents to our oldest residents. But I think we simply must lift the wages and the benefits. I'm happy to support and vote for MCO when it finally comes before the Board of Supervisors. This will only be the beginning as we need to continue to continually raise these wages.
Thank you. I'm going to go to some audience questions. We've received questions from the audience, both here in person and over the live stream. I'm going to start with a question on the topic of conservatorship. This is from Alice, who lives in the Mission. Senate Bill 1045 takes an out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach to homelessness and conservatorship. While the current version of the bill states that conservatorships will terminate in a year, there is an option of it being renewed. She has a two-part question. What is your position on this bill and others and similar approaches to homelessness that compel treatment and hospitalization? And in the rush to get people off the streets, how can we respect their civil rights and make sure they are not warehoused or institutionalized indefinitely, especially when the current capacity for community-based services is so inadequate? Angela.
You know, I am absolutely opposed to this, as I was when it was introduced. Ladies and gentlemen, conservatorship is extremely serious. I understand there are horribly mentally ill people in the sense that they have serious mental illness and triple diagnosis and everything that goes with living on the street when 90 days on the street and your brain starts to deteriorate as it is. I get that. But that doesn't mean that you should be conserved to the point of 24 hours, 7 days a week. It means that you need your specific health care. You don't need to literally lose all of your freedoms. Now, I understand that there are some people that conservatorship might play a role in, but it's an extremely serious legal thing to do to somebody, to take away their life 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So that needs to be examined by a judge on a case-by-case analysis, not on a, we're going to go out and we're going to conserve 90 people when they only have a bad 2 hours in the afternoon, which it could be schizophrenia, could be paranoia, and the rest of the time they're okay. Those specific disabilities and illnesses need to be looked at specifically, and not as a group of everybody is crazy and we're going to put them away for a while.
Thank you.
And I told Scott Wiener that. I'm not shy about this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. London, same question.
Thank you. Yes, I support Senate Bill 1045. In fact, I introduced a resolution at the Board of Supervisors encouraging my colleagues to support it, and unfortunately, it did not pass. And let me tell you why. A specific example, there is a man who is a senior citizen who's in the Haight-Ashbury community, who is a schizophrenic, who many of the merchants and the people who live there, they've tried to help him. At one point in his day, he's in his right mind, and at another point, he gets really violent. And on top of that, when he gets his check every month, it gets taken by some of the other folks out on the streets. He doesn't have money to pay for his medication. He's not taking medication. He's homeless. And the fact is, he has a challenge where he needs, from my perspective, someone who could assist him. It's not about warehousing people or institutionalizing people permanently. In fact, this legislation requires counties to actually not only opt in, but more importantly, the person who is under a guardianship can petition every 30 days, for a change in that particular law. This is about getting people who we all see every single day struggling on our streets the help and the support that they need, rather than just leave them out there to die. This is a more, as far as I'm concerned, this is a person who the police love, who the merchants love, who all of the folks in the Haight-Ashbury community want to take care of. And because of these archaic laws that have existed since the 1960s, we can't do anything to help him, and that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you, London. Jane, same question.
I stated 2 days ago when the SB 1045 bill was before us that I'm opening to re-examining the criteria that we use for conservatorship, even expanding the eligible population, as long as there is a right to counsel, because we are talking about civil liberties at stake, and streamlining the process. But we have to expand our treatment beds first. And one of the issues that we have here today is that we do have many people that are sick on our streets, but even if they are willing to come inside, we don't have the treatment beds available for them, a step that we would need to take before conservatorship. This is not my area of expertise, and I do really think that it's important to have a robust discussion around how we use this very heavy-handed tool to address what we're all experiencing on the streets. No one likes to see anyone suffering or experiencing a mental health episode. People feel scared, it feels dangerous, but of course, in our hearts, we also just don't want to see anyone suffering. We really do need a solution to what we're seeing on the streets, but it involves a very robust discussion about what are the best ways to do that. But at minimum, we must heavily expand our medical respite beds and our treatment beds in our hospitals. I work to expand our only 24-hour medical respite shelter in the south of Market to 75 beds, and this is a shelter for homeless residents staffed by nurses, clinicians, and psychologists, so that when SFPD and the HOT team comes by because they got a call of complaint, they actually have a bed to take them to. But these 75 beds are simply not enough. We need to greatly expand this program.
Thank you. Mark.
Traditionally, the senior community and people with disabilities have been very and rightfully wary of the use of conservatorship. Families who find an older member to be, quote, in the way or getting to be too much of a burden have used and abused conservatorships for very detrimental purposes. That is not a part of what Senator Wiener is addressing. The bill, to the degree to which I'm familiar with it, focuses specifically on those who have had repeated action, contact with our law enforcement and with our mental health professionals at our hospitals. So for those folks, I think there is reason to look at this. But it is more a symptom than a problem. The problem is we, the city, has cut mental health beds at San Francisco General. Sutter has cut mental health beds at St. Luke's and at the Davies campus. And how is it possible that this enormous new hospital on Geary at Van Ness does not have a single additional mental health bed? And then we wonder why we have a crisis on our streets. So yes, the legislation is worthy of moving forward and making sure that it is very narrow in its scope because, as others have already described, there are people on our streets who, by current definition, cannot involuntarily be given any kind of medical assistance, and we know that they need it. But first and foremost, let's make sure there is no opportunity for abuse against our senior community and for people with disabilities.
Thank you, Mark. We have a variety of questions related to employment and income inequality, so I'll try to ask one question that sort of encapsulates all of that. So San Francisco's economy is booming. The city appears to be doing well. There is a perception that it is really kind of a playground for the young, the able-bodied, the rich, the techies. This community wants a piece of that economy too. And yet employment rates for people with disabilities, as an example, are more than twice that for the able-bodied population, those without disabilities. As mayor, what would you do to create workforce initiatives, partnering with the private sector, maybe some of the shiny new companies that are benefiting from tax breaks in the city, to increase employment opportunities for qualified seniors and people with disabilities who want to work and deserve to work and need a foot in the door? Angela.
Again, as a civil rights attorney, this is what I do for a living, and I can tell you it's very, very difficult in these private companies to have them keep employees that are elderly. And by the way, elderly is described over 40, which is pretty hard to believe. Okay, thank you all.
Wow.
Oh, yes, 40 is the year, and it's just kind of ridiculous, but I'll tell you something. My clients that are over 40, if they get fired, they have a very, very hard time getting a job, especially if they're disabled. I've had many, many clients with Parkinson's, and they just cannot get another job. So the goal would be to sit down and talk with the tech industry and work out a deal with them where they employ the elderly and the disabled in the jobs when they can fill the requirements, the necessary requirements of that job description, which, by the way, is very often more diverse than people without disabilities and people who are young. So the situation is you need to sit down and create a coalition with the tech industry and make them understand the importance of the values of San Francisco are to keep the elderly and the disabled employed if they so wish to be. And nobody sits down with these people. They don't sit down with government and the citizens, and that's been a big problem with everybody coming to town with so many employees, no affordable housing, nobody sat down and talked. I would be a great advocate for this community because I really want you to do what you want to do in your older years and with any disabilities, because that's what San Francisco's about.
Thank you, Angela. London.
Thank you. You know, in my education platform, which is on my website, londonformayor.com, I talk specifically about connecting the next generation of young people to job opportunities with the industries like the healthcare, the tech, the city and county of San Francisco, how we need to provide paid internships for these young people for the purposes of making sure that they're included in the future of San Francisco, because there clearly is a disconnect. And when I first became a member of the Board of Supervisors, I made sure that we were consistently having job fairs with different industries, whether it's retail, whether it's tech and others, not only in our community, but at places where we knew people needed employment. At Queen Ada, which is a place that provides food for many of our low-income seniors, we hold regular job fairs. We hold regular outreach sessions around housing and other things for that particular population. And as mayor, I do think it's important that we set the standard to connect the dots. Part of it is going to be consistency in going into the community where we know seniors are, especially at places like Queen Ada or Komochi or other places where we know seniors and people who are a part of our disabled community are showing up every single day, for the meals that are provided. And so I think as mayor, it's important to be consistent, provide those same job opportunities, because they actually exist in the nonprofit world, in the tech world, in the healthcare world, and we have to make sure that we hold these companies accountable to connect the dots to our senior and disabled community.
Thank you, London. Jane?
San Francisco has the fastest growing income gap between the rich and the poor in the country, according to the Brookings Institute. And we are seeing a declining middle class. Our middle class used to make up close to 50% of our city's population in 1990. As of 2012, it's declined to 33%. Meanwhile, our economy has grown 111%, which means that we have grown a tremendous amount of wealth in San Francisco, but it is further concentrating into the hands of less people. We need to do a lot of work, a lot of deliberate and intentional work to make sure that prosperity is felt by all of our residents. One of the reasons why I fought for Free City College via an ultra-luxury real estate transfer tax of buildings of $5 million and above is that we need to ask our industries that are doing well to invest in our residents and social infrastructure that lifts all of us. I went to Stanford, a great four-year university, but if I want to take a class to re-up my skills or take a language class, I can't go back. However, I can go to community college, which is our only lifelong learning institution. And the average job available for a City College graduate is $11,000 more than for the same person with just a high school diploma. We need to develop a better infrastructure within City College and our workforce development training program for our seniors and connect them directly to the jobs that we are creating here in the city and county of San Francisco, so that we can more evenly distribute the wealth and prosperity that the city is experiencing to a greater number of our residents.
Thank you, Jane. Mark?
I think the first thing that we need to do is reframe this entire debate and issue. Rather than think of our aging population as a silver tsunami which is going to overwhelm us, we should think of it as a vitality victory. We've got all of this talent, all of this experience, all of this know-how. Life experience is invaluable. You can't buy it. Well, you should be able to buy it. And so it's two-part. I want to build on what Supervisor Kim has done with City College. We were able to get to Free City because as chair of the Senate Budget Committee, I was able to bring home $120 million to save City College at the depths of its accreditation crisis. And now that we have Free City, I'm proposing that we look at a model out of Long Beach called the Long Beach Promise. They have a City College, we have one, they have a state university campus, we have a state university campus. We should have Free City and Free State. So as long as we are retraining people in mid and later life, that it shouldn't stop at an AA, it should have the possibility of an BA, and we should also be focusing on local hiring. There's every opportunity for all these new jobs that are created to take some of the talent and experience that is within our senior population, and through outreach and further job training, we can place seniors and those with disabilities into the new jobs that are created today.
Thank you, Mark. A number of people are concerned about pedestrian safety.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Judith from the Western Addition is a senior, and she says, I'm concerned for my safety when trying to catch a bus or cross a street. What steps will you take on the Van Ness and Geary transit corridors to allow seniors the time we need to cross the street and catch the bus? And just adding to that, seniors and people with disabilities are disproportionately victims of traffic fatalities. A dear friend of mine, Tu Fan, was killed about a year ago at 7th and Market on her way to work. She was a wheelchair user. Somebody was making a left turn onto Market. Last year, seniors comprised 50% of the traffic fatalities. What will you do as mayor to both reduce this number, but also to make the streets safer, to clear our sidewalks of scooters and bicycles and everything else that impedes our ability to move and navigate in this great city? Mark.
I think it's as simple as 3 E's: educate, enforce, and engineer. So the education part is to make sure that everyone who's behind the wheel of a car knows a simple fact, that speed kills. We must let people understand that they have someone's life and someone's family at risk if they're being cavalier in not obeying the speed limit. The same with folks who are riding bicycles on a sidewalk or a scooter on a sidewalk. This is not safe behavior. So we have to raise consciousness and educate folks. But secondly, we have to enforce those who are breaking the law. So with regards to speeding, there's a bill moving through the legislature that would allow for speed cameras where we can improve upon the technology, make sure there's no for-profit motive in it, but be able to make sure folks know there is consequence to their speeding. And for those who are using scooters on a sidewalk, that's against state law, and if they don't have a helmet on, that is as well. We need to enforce the law. And then finally, so that we can implement Vision Zero, and we can do it. If we think it's a priority, let's put our minds and money at it and make sure that we succeed at Vision Zero, and that is the engineering opportunities, how we can design safer streets, traffic calming. There are very many methods that are used around the world. Some of them we're using here, but between education, enforcement, and engineering, we can save lives.
Thank you, Mark. Angela, I'll go to you next.
Thank you.
Pedestrian safety.
Absolutely. And, you know, it boggles my mind that the industry, the tech industry, though I think tech is very exciting, wonderful, great. We just need plans. That they would create a scooter that goes over city government to your telephone. And so all of a sudden there's scooters all over the city and county of San Francisco, and nobody's gotten real permission. There are no rules and regulations. You hear them coming from behind you, and all you think about are your ankles. It's like, please, you've got to be kidding. There are no helmets. They go fast. They should not be on the sidewalk. There need to be penalties, and there need to be rules. And again, like I said before, they need to sit down with the government and work it out. They can't just come in and do whatever they want to do. It's pretty amazing to me. And the other issue, you know, Mark was talking about speeding. I think the biggest problem is texting. People are on their phone while they're driving, and they don't see you because they're looking at a telephone, which is pretty amazing to me. I put the telephone in the back seat, so I'm not even tempted. Anyone that texts while they're driving needs to be severely punished because you can't see. You can't see the pedestrians while you're looking at your telephone, and it's always the elderly, the disabled, and the young that are the ones that are the victims of these negligent people, and they need to be punished so they don't do it again.
Thank you, Angela. London.
Thank you. You know, I think part of the challenge here in San Francisco is, honestly, there's a lot of things that we need to do, but we really need to make sure that there are consequences for fast driving. You hardly see anyone in this city who's speeding ever getting a ticket. And so we need to change that, because if people truly believe that they will get a ticket for this kind of behavior, then hopefully that could help address the issue. We need to also add more cameras in areas where we know it's really challenging in some of our most dangerous corridors. We need to continue to move forward and enforce some of the policies under Vision Zero, where we are trying to increase the timing on lights, changing the engineering and infrastructure of the streets so that they are safer, the bulb outs and a number of other things. And I know people are frustrated by bulb outs, but it is shown that they actually help to save lives. So what we have to do as a city is look at a wholehearted approach to addressing these issues, but especially what will be at the top of my priority is going to definitely be enforcement, so that people know that there's consequences in this city for breaking the law, which also includes the need to regulate the scooters, which at the Board of Supervisors, we passed legislation. Hopefully the MTA will get the notice and move forward and address this issue appropriately, because our city policies are not keeping up with the technology as we move forward. And so we as a city have to do a better job, and if I'm the mayor, we will.
Thank you, London. Jane.
The very first hearing I called for when I joined the Board of Supervisors in 2011 was a pedestrian safety hearing. During my time as a candidate, I heard from residents from South Beach to Tenderloin to 6th Street, that Weston Soma, that everyone had a friend that they knew that had been hit by a car while crossing the street. And in fact, was shocked when I learned that more people are killed by cars than by guns here in San Francisco. So I was proud to author Vision Zero with then Supervisor John Avalos and Supervisor Norman Yee, and I've been working steadily to make our city safer. We have seen a reduction in pedestrian fatalities last year, and every life that is saved is one more person that has stayed with their family, with their friends, have continued working in our city. 75% of all injuries and deaths occur on only 13% of our streets, which means that if we just dedicate support, education, enforcement, and engineering on 13% of our streets, we can reduce fatalities and injuries by over 50%. I led the effort for Tenderloin to be the first neighborhood to see daylighting, where we remove parked cars by the crosswalks so seniors and drivers can see each other. I also led the initiative to increase signalized crosswalks throughout the south of Market, where we have very long blocks like Natoma and 8th, where Cannon Kip are, or Folsom and Mabini, where senior housing under Todco exists. I also was a strong proponent for speed enforcement cameras at Sacramento the last 2 years, because we know that reducing speed saves lives. In a case where a car is driving 40 miles an hour, only 2 out of 10 pedestrians survive. But when the car is driving 20 miles an hour, 9 out of 10 pedestrians survive.
Thank you, Jane.
So we simply must do more around this effort.
These have been wonderful questions. There are many, many, many of them. Top of mind for a lot of people is housing. You've addressed the homelessness problems. We've talked a little bit about creating more housing stock. I just wanted to switch gears a little bit as we start to wind down and ask a question just to get to know you a little bit better. What, in your view, makes a city livable? And is San Francisco meeting that mark for seniors and people with disabilities? London, I'll start with you.
I think what makes a city livable is having a roof over your head. I think that being able to live in dignity is really important, no matter who you are, no matter where you come from, no matter what your age is. Having a roof over your head, having a place that you can comfortably move around in, having an accessible bathroom, if you're disabled, those are, to me, those are some basic needs that we as a city have to do a better job of addressing. And what was the second part of your question?
Do you think San Francisco is living up to that?
So clearly San Francisco is not living up to that, because, no matter how much we've been able to move forward, I mean, in my district, we opened 98 new housing units for seniors. Last year, we opened 70 units for formerly homeless veterans in the city. We've done a lot of work to move San Francisco forward with these incredible opportunities, and every person who's able to get housing is definitely an incredible opportunity for that person. But as far as I'm concerned, we have failed until we address all of those people who are not only living on our streets, but the people that we know who are living in conditions that are inhumane, people who are living in places where there are issues around mold and elevator access and all of the basic things that allow for someone to live comfortably. And so we as a city need to make sure that those things are our priorities. Our most vulnerable population has to be our priority. I mean, eventually we all are going to get there to a point where we might need someone to take care of us, and we need to remember that when pushing forward policies to address these issues.
Thank you. Jane, what is your standard for what makes a city livable, and is San Francisco meeting that standard for this population?
So I would say general affordability is what makes a city livable. I'm proud to live in a city that is a sanctuary city. I'm proud to live in a city that has made City College free. I'm proud to live in a city with some of the more progressive policies in the country. But the most progressive policies in the world don't help everyone if people can't afford to live here in San Francisco. And affordability means a lot of things. The most obvious, of course, is making sure that we build more affordable and middle-income housing. We simply need to subsidize housing so that everyone can afford to live here. But I believe that we need to invest in 4 social pillars that support a working class community and grow a middle class community here in San Francisco again. That is investing in housing, education, transportation, and healthcare. We must invest in all of these 4 institutions and make them high quality and affordable as well. As an MTC commissioner, I'm currently advocating for a regional discount pass for all low-income households, because we know that low-income households no longer ride just one operator. They're riding 2 or 3 operators across the Bay Area to get to services or to get to work. And transportation is now the 2nd or 3rd highest budgetary item for any low-income household in the Bay Area. So, we need to invest in these 4 pillars to make sure that San Francisco is a livable city and a great city for all of us.
Thank you, Jane. Mark.
It's unfortunate that we can't take for granted today in San Francisco life's basics: food, clothing, and shelter. Those are obviously the things that keep us alive, so that's what basically defines a livable city. But beyond that, a livable city is a place of community where we have our support systems in place. And I'm reminded of that when someone loses his or her home due to a no-cause eviction like the Ellis Act. And of course, we've seen it happening in communities throughout town, in the Mission and in Chinatown and in North Beach and the Castro, where 70-year-old men who have survived an epidemic for 35 years are now losing their homes. But beyond losing their homes, they're losing their access to their medical care and to their pharmacies and to all of the support networks, social as well as medical, that sustain their lives and keep them alive. Community is what sustains us. And when people are displaced, they lose it all. It's not just an apartment. It's not just a home, if that weren't enough. So first and foremost, we've got to keep people who are housed in their homes. And that means fighting no-cause evictions and taking Ellis Act speculators to court to stop what they're doing.
Thank you. Angela, do you need the question again, or you
No,
got it?
a livable city, a viable city is a city that doesn't have homelessness, that doesn't have filthy, dirty streets, that doesn't have congestion where you can't even move, that doesn't have crime, where you don't feel safe anywhere. I'm born and raised San Franciscan. My father was born and raised San Franciscan, one of the greatest mayors the city ever had. My grandmother, Alioto, born and raised in North Beach. And I have never, ever seen our city look the way it looks today, ever. So one would think one would think that housing is an obvious. Of course people need housing in a viable city. Of course they need housing to be in the city. But they also need community. They need business neighborhoods that are viable, not boarded up, not vacancies for 6 months in a row that ruin your local community, that ruin your local neighborhood. Our neighborhoods in San Francisco are famous. Our small business are the backbone of our city, and they're closing down. I don't think I've ever seen the city so badly or bad or whatever the adjective is off as it is today, which is why I'm running for mayor of San Francisco, because I know a livable, beautiful San Francisco, and I know we can bring it back to that. I know that all we have to do is take care of the citizens of San Francisco and create coalitions to make that happen, and that's not what we're doing. So that is exactly why I'm running for mayor. Safety, crime, affordable housing, homelessness. I just want to say one thing. Last night on the news, did any of you see the Civic Center BART station where people were lined up, shooting up? It looked like an emergency ward.
Thank you, Angela.
I was shocked to see that that is allowed in our great city.
Thank you. I will give each of you 30 seconds or so, 30, 45 seconds to make a closing statement, if you wish. You can have a minute. All right, you can have a minute. I'm looking at the time, and I promised them we would get out of here on time, but go ahead. London, we will start with you. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. You know, I was born and raised in San Francisco, and the city has provided me an incredible opportunity. I went to public schools here. I was raised by my grandmother in some of the most challenging circumstances. I really wasn't supposed to be here. And here I am with an opportunity as a member of the Board of Supervisors and a candidate for mayor, because I want to make sure that all of the challenges that have existed in the past, that have basically, from my perspective and growing up in the Western Addition, that has destroyed and lives in the community. I want to make sure that as a mayor of this city that we remember that what we have to do is focus on connecting the dots between the people, the money we spend, the people, the policies we push forward, making sure that we are addressing these issues around homelessness, housing, so they actually connect to what we're here to do as mayor. And so I am committed to putting the policies, moving the policies forward in a productive way that actually serves the citizens of this city. I thank you for the opportunity. Please check out my website, londonformayor.com. I look forward to this race being over on June 5th. And
It's
so
almost
please vote
over.
for me.
Thank you very much. Jane, 1 minute. Jane, there you go.
I want to thank the Dignity Fund and all the coalition partners for organizing this forum today. And I also want to thank you for all of your tenacious and passionate advocacy at City Hall for ordinances that take care of all of us. And of course, every year in the budget season, I look forward to seeing you over the next 2 months as we fight to make sure that we are fighting for services that take care of our city. As I said in the last response, I really believe that we as a city must invest in housing, transportation, education, and healthcare if we are going to regrow a middle class here in San Francisco again and support our working class communities. We must make San Francisco an affordable city. Otherwise, we will become a city of the rich, the ultra rich, and the very poor. And that is not a tenable vision for any city as we move forward. I would be honored to earn your vote on June 5th and your support over the next 6 weeks. Again, I want to thank you for your passionate advocacy and as a supervisor, inspiring me to fight for our communities harder every single day.
Thank you, Jane. Angela.
I think you all know how I feel about, just in case my passion wasn't enough, I think you also all know that I would be the most incredible advocate for the elderly and the disabled of any mayor that has ever been in the mayor's office. This is what I do, this is what I love doing, and I will be a wonderful mayor for this community. And I want to thank Dignity for the wonderful job that they do. Thank you for great work, great work. I hope you'll vote for me when you go in there or you sign your absentee. It's ALIOTO, number one, and you can find all of my plans at aliotoformayor.com. I've worked on homelessness. I know how it works. We were very successful from 2004 to 2012, and then everything got misplaced, including the money and the housing. Just disappeared and went to other affordable at $130,000 a year, which is not affordable. So look at my plan. We know how to do it. I did it with Gavin Newsom, and it worked.
Thank
I'm going
you,
to do it
Angela.
again. Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you.
Mark, we'll end with you.
Let me add my thanks to the Dignity Fund Coalition, the 30 organizations that show that this community is fearless, fearsome, and accomplished, and Prop I is a manifestation of that fact. I am running for mayor because I'm convinced that it's time for a new direction at City Hall, that on June 5th, the voters of San Francisco will have a clear choice between fundamental change and the status quo, because the status quo is not working for any of us. Our crises of homelessness, housing affordability and availability, the crime in our streets, we need a pair of fresh eyes. I've not been in city government for 16 years, having had the honor of representing you in the State Assembly and State Senate the past 14. And we need a mayor who's going to think big and think differently and think regionally. So many of these problems that we're facing, these challenges, are not unique to San Francisco. They are regional, they are statewide. And then we need to reject any cynicism
Time.
and demand
Mark.
results. We can get this done.
Mark,
Thank you.
That's time. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you to the Dignity Fund Coalition and its member organizations for putting together the most accessible town hall this political season. Thank you to the volunteers. Thank you to the candidates for prioritizing our community and making time to be here with us today. Thank you to all of you who came and who are watching on the live stream. Make sure that you vote. Please vote. And make your way safely out of the theater. Thank you.